So just to start off, I essentially, in a nutshell, I've investigated organisms and systems at all structural levels, from the chemical level, looking at genomics and epigenetics and proteomics, to looking at ensembles or networks of cells, to organ system endophenotypes, to delving deeper into the hierarchies of the connectomes and kind of organism level functions, and all the way to groups of organisms and populations. That would mean looking at the structure, the microanatomy, or the kind of infrastructure of a system, and how it gives rise to specialized emergent functions or functionalities. And of course, each of these perspectives are kind of wholly integrated together. They are fully recurrent with one another, also in many ways. So there are three main areas to cover here. I think the first is looking at human biology and any physical system that have properties of life. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are also, what I'm interested in is psychological phenomena, or any sort of information processing that results in conscious experience or expression. This of course overlaps with concepts in educational psychology in humans, at all age demographics and at all lifespan developmental stages. And thirdly, there is the idea of technology that I'm very immersed in. So these are essentially concepts implemented as synthetically made tools to make our lives better. So technology would be anything from a pen to an advanced computer, and of course here I'm going to focus on the kind of state of the art of today and modern computers in particular. So a lot of these endeavors are predicated on different cognitive informational processes in the brain. There are learning processes like reading and studying. Also research processes in terms of, for example, what I've done carrying out experimental, scientific or academic research, and there's also, of course, teaching and dissemination of that research and data. Finally, there's also further meta-research on the effectiveness of that dissemination, and of course this feeds back into all the other processes. Just to explain a bit more about each of those. The idea of research, essentially, it involves on the data collection initially, and everything that comes before that, or the planning and so on, and the methods. And so that could be, with data collection, it could be any kind of data. So for example, like biophysiological data, whether it be invasive or non-invasive, biometric information, neuroimaging, psychometrics, cognitive, behavioral, user behavior data. It could be doing measurements both in person and also live in vivo in humans. That could be in labs or observations in naturalistic environments. So often there are hybrid systems in place, such as using electronic portable devices, e-tablets, electronic devices, mobile devices. In fact, let me show you this. So essentially, for any kind of data collection, you could use any sort of smartphone or mobile device. Or in fact, I've got, let me show you what I would usually use quite frequently when you're doing interactions with people, for example, at London institutions where I'd be involved in collecting data. Often it's very helpful to use a tablet. So let me just log into this, and essentially it just is extremely efficient tool to kind of communicate information efficiently. Also, you can actually let people fill in. Let me actually bring up one of the forms that I'd used quite a lot, if I can find it. For example, I mean there's a lot there, but essentially I'm not sure if you can see it. It's very hard to see, but ultimately these are done through a lot of the software that I used, and you can actually formulate surveys and questionnaires and put in stimuli and any sort of cue for that particular individual to engage in, for them to fill in answers and so on and so forth. So ultimately, I would use a lot of those tools that also allow efficient data collection, real-time data storage as well, and it just makes it far more efficient and optimal to actually communicate with others, and that would be in-person venues or in any other situation. So I'll close this here, and so in other videos I've also put demonstrations of the other kinds of devices and also the hardware and software tools that I had used quite extensively, and I'll put a link in the description for more information on that. So in terms of research data collection, it's purely based on, well, it can be based on purely just web-based online data as well. So using open access databases is something that's done quite a lot, and it could even be digital data sets of really any type of information, any type of metadata. So I've mentioned a few already, but there's also qualitative text transcripts, images, to things like financial, econometric data, pretty much anything. A lot of this is actually crowdsourced, so where that is where each user has kind of owns a dividend of the data, and some is more privately shared. So that's that. And of course there's all the data processing and the artifact pre-processing, quantifications, analyses, meta-analyses that involves the inferential statistics as well. I've been quite involved in debugging a lot of the data processing pipelines and doing the fact-checking, proofreading, and all this are essentially a kind of bunch of iterative processes, and you know, as a person, you kind of learn along the way through trial and error almost. So that's that, and of course much of this involves a lot of advanced computational modeling as well. I'll be talking more about that later. Another thing I mentioned is looking at the teaching and dissemination of content. So I've been quite involved in producing workshops and presentations in the past, and like planning the delivery of that, and also writing, doing systematic reviewing protocols when it comes to publishing procedures, for example, and I'll explain more about that later. And of course that requires quite a deep understanding of statistics in terms of, not just in terms of mathematical formulations, but also the neuropsychological imperatives, if you wish. So understanding logical fallacies and biases in humans, and psychophysical operations at the level of cognition, and that's a very interesting topic in itself.